The courtroom fell silent. All eyes locked on one woman as the judge spoke the words that would change her life forever. "Please rise." Those two words echoed through the air like a final warning before a storm. After years of investigation, lies, and betrayal, justice had finally caught up to her. The evidence was undeniable, the verdict, unanimous. The level of planning and coordination behind the murder of Professor Dan Markel wasn't random, it was deliberate, calculated, carried out with the kind of precision that only comes from cold intent. This wasn't a crime of chance or emotion. It was a plot, one that involved secret calls, hidden meetings, and even family turning against family. And at the center of it all stood Donna Adelson, the mother accused of masterminding the murder of her own son-in-law. The courtroom listened as the judge detailed the crimes one by one. First-degree murder, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, solicitation to commit first-degree murder. Each word landed heavier than the last. The jury had spoken and the sentence was clear: life in prison without parole. But what led to this moment? How did a respected family, once known for their success and influence, end up shattered by betrayal and bloodshed? And what secret conversations took place behind closed doors before the gun was ever fired? This is the story of the murder of Dan Markel, a story of obsession, family loyalty, and a desperate attempt to control a future that was slipping away. As the judge's gavel struck for the final time, Donna Adelson's fate was sealed. But her conviction only opened the door to more questions. Because behind every decision, every text, and every whispered plan, there was more than just anger, there was fear. And somewhere in that web of deceit lies the truth about what really happened to Dan Markel.
Welcome to the Case File. Here, every crime has a story, every mystery leaves a trail, and every detail could be the difference between truth and deception. From assassinations that shook the nation, to manhunts that gripped entire cities, we uncover the raw, unfiltered events behind the headlines. These are not just stories. They are lives, choices, and consequences. The files are open, the cases are real, and the truth is waiting to be found. This is the Case File. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next case might be the one that changes everything.
It was a quiet Friday morning in Tallahassee. Professor Dan Markel had just finished a workout at the gym and was driving home, unaware that someone was following him. Neighbors later said they heard a loud pop, then another. Within seconds, the calm of the neighborhood shattered. Dan Markel's car rolled to a stop in his driveway. He was found slumped over the steering wheel, shot in the head. The police arrived within minutes. The scene was disturbing, but something didn't add up. Nothing was stolen. His wallet, his phone, even his car keys, all there. This wasn't a robbery. It was a message. Detectives began piecing together the timeline. Who would want a well-respected law professor dead? Dan Markel was known for his sharp mind and strong opinions. At Florida State University, he taught criminal law and wrote about justice and fairness. But outside the classroom, his life was complicated. He was in the middle of a painful divorce from his wife, Wendy Adelson. The separation had turned bitter, especially over custody of their two young children. Wendy had wanted to move the boys to Miami, where her wealthy family lived. Dan refused. A judge sided with him, ordering that the children remain in Tallahassee. That decision changed everything. Investigators soon learned about the growing resentment between the Markel and Adelson families. Wendy's brother, Charlie Adelson, often joked that hiring a hitman would be cheaper than continuing the custody battle. At first, those words sounded like dark humor, but later they would take on a chilling meaning. The detectives started pulling records, phone logs, bank statements, security footage. They traced movements, calls, and cars. Slowly, a picture began to form. Two men from South Florida, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera, had driven to Tallahassee just days before the shooting, and someone had paid them. It was a calculated plan. The killers followed Dan for 2 days, watching him, learning his routine. When the moment came, they waited in his driveway until he pulled in. 2 shots. Then they were gone. The car they used, a silver Prius, was caught on multiple cameras along the highway heading back to South Florida. That single piece of evidence became the thread that unraveled the entire plot. When police tracked the car, it led them to Garcia and Rivera. Rivera, already serving time for another crime, began to talk. He told investigators that Charlie Adelson had been the one behind the plan, and that Donna Adelson, Charlie and Wendy's mother, helped organize the payments through a woman named Catherine Magbanua, Charlie's girlfriend. The more Rivera spoke, the clearer it became. This wasn't random. It was a family operation. Each person had a role. Charlie provided the money. Catherine connected him to the hitmen. Donna kept the communication flowing. And Wendy, though never charged, seemed to know more than she admitted. But prosecutors knew they needed proof. Solid, undeniable proof. Then came the break they were waiting for, an undercover FBI operation using hidden microphones and secret recordings. In one of those recordings, Charlie and Catherine were caught discussing the case in code, referencing the TV problem, a phrase investigators believed referred to Dan Markel. Piece by piece, the puzzle started to make sense. By the time the first arrests were made, the world finally began to see what had been hiding behind a picture-perfect family image, a murder-for-hire plot born out of anger and pride. The courtroom would later hear every detail, the money trail, the phone calls, the meetings. And while each person involved tried to distance themselves, the evidence painted one story, a story that ended with Dan Markel's death, and the Adelson family torn apart forever. But this was only the beginning. Because after the killers were convicted, prosecutors still had one more name on their list, the one they believed started it all. And that name was Donna Adelson. Months had passed since the hitmen were sentenced. Sigfredo Garcia received life in prison. Luis Rivera, who cooperated, took a plea deal and avoided the death penalty. But even as the killers sat behind bars, investigators knew the job wasn't finished. The money didn't start with them, and it didn't end with them either. Detectives believed the person truly behind the murder was still walking free. They turned their focus to the Adelson family, the people who had everything to gain from Dan Markel's death. Charlie Adelson was a wealthy dentist in South Florida. His mother, Donna, was deeply protective of her children, especially Wendy, who had endured the bitter divorce. For years, rumors had circulated that the Adelsons wanted to solve the problem being Dan, who refused to let their grandkids move away from Tallahassee. But rumors weren't enough. The FBI needed proof that connected Donna and Charlie directly to the hit. That's when agents came up with a bold idea: create pressure. They launched an undercover operation that would change everything. A man pretending to be part of the original hit team approached the Adelsons. He claimed he was owed money for the job. Hidden cameras and microphones recorded every word. The plan was simple. If the Adelsons had anything to do with the murder, the message would reach them and they would react. Soon after, Donna received a strange call. The caller said he wanted to meet and talk about what happened in Tallahassee. She panicked. And from that moment, her every move became evidence. FBI surveillance captured Donna discussing the incident with Charlie in public places, her voice low, nervous, unsure of who might be listening. The recordings didn't just show fear, they showed guilt. Charlie tried to reassure her, but his own tone revealed that they both knew exactly what was being discussed. He mentioned the situation and the hit in carefully chosen words, but there was no mistaking the meaning. Agents now had what they needed: a window into the family's private knowledge of the murder. In 2022, after years of piecing together wiretaps, text messages, and bank transfers, investigators made their move. Charlie Adelson was arrested first. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation to commit murder. During his trial, jurors saw the recordings, heard the testimony, and watched how the family's story slowly collapsed under the weight of evidence. Prosecutors painted a clear picture. This was not a crime of passion. It was a carefully planned execution meant to remove an obstacle, a man who stood in the way of the Adelsons' plans. When Charlie was found guilty, attention turned to his mother. Donna had been in the courtroom many times, always calm, always controlled. But after Charlie's conviction, everything changed. Investigators uncovered new messages, conversations, and transactions, all pointing back to her. Then, just as the state prepared to charge her, Donna made a desperate move. In November 2023, she and her husband booked one-way tickets to Vietnam. They claimed it was for a vacation, but to investigators, it looked like an escape. Before she could board the plane, FBI agents arrested her at the Miami International Airport. The news spread fast. After nearly a decade of speculation, Donna Adelson was finally in custody. In interrogation, she denied everything. But the evidence told a different story. Prosecutors said she helped organize payments to the hitmen through Catherine Magbanua and kept close contact with her son during the planning stages. Her arrest was the final link, the last piece of the puzzle that connected every part of the conspiracy. Her trial became one of the most watched in Florida that year. Viewers followed every word, every reaction, every tear. The prosecution called it the final act of justice for Dan Markel. And when the jury returned with their verdict, the silence in the courtroom said it all. Guilty. On all counts. The same words the judge would later repeat before sentencing her to life in prison. But even as the gavel fell, one question remained: How far would a family go to protect itself, and what had it all been for? As Donna was led away in handcuffs, her expression barely changed. For the first time she wasn't in control. And somewhere, perhaps in that quiet moment, she knew that every lie, every secret, every dollar spent, had finally come back around. When the final verdict was read, the courtroom sat frozen. Donna Adelson stood motionless as the judge's words echoed through the room. Life in prison. No possibility of parole. It was the end of a long, painful road, not only for her but for everyone touched by the case. Nearly a decade after Dan Markel's murder, justice had finally reached the top of the chain. But justice in this story came with heartbreak on both sides. Dan's family, who had waited years for this moment, felt a sense of relief. His parents had fought relentlessly to make sure his sons would know the truth, that their father had been taken not by accident, but by design. They spoke quietly after the sentencing, saying that while nothing could bring Dan back, they could finally breathe again knowing his killers had been held accountable. But in another corner of the courtroom, the Adelson family was falling apart. Charlie Adelson sat in his own prison cell facing the same lifetime sentence. Donna was now behind bars. And Wendy, the woman whose life once seemed untouched, was left alone, raising her children under the weight of questions she has never answered publicly. Every detail of the case had been dissected on national television. Podcasts, documentaries, and legal analysts examined every word, every piece of evidence, every family interaction. The case became more than a headline. It became a study of how greed, control, and resentment can destroy everything. For the investigators who had worked the case since 2014, the moment was bittersweet. They had spent years following leads, reviewing calls, and piecing together the puzzle that stretched across cities and years. Many of them said they would never forget the look on Donna's face when the verdict was read. Not anger, not confusion, just resignation. Outside the courthouse, news cameras captured the scene. Reporters spoke about how this case had exposed a dark reality behind a family that once seemed perfect. Behind closed doors, there were secrets, grudges, and a determination to win at any cost. Meanwhile, Dan's legacy continued at Florida State University. His colleagues remembered him as a brilliant scholar, a dedicated teacher, and a loving father. Each year, students still quote his writings on justice and fairness, words that now carry even deeper meaning. For the community, the case became a symbol of endurance. Proof that no matter how carefully a crime is hidden, truth has a way of surfacing. It also became a warning that actions taken in anger can destroy generations. As for Donna, her story ends where she never thought it would, in a prison cell far from her Miami home. She once lived surrounded by comfort, wealth, and family. Now her days are measured in silence and routine. Her recommendation for placement near Miami was granted by the judge, but the Department of Corrections had the final say. Inmates whispered about her case, about how a grandmother could be tied to something so cold. Each day that passes is a reminder of what she lost: her freedom, her family, and the image of control she tried to hold onto. But for Dan Markel's loved ones, her conviction was not about revenge. It was about truth. It was about making sure his children grow up knowing their father's name stood for integrity, even in the face of tragedy. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful ending of all. That justice, though delayed, found its way, piece by piece, word by word, until the truth stood alone. Years after the murder of Dan Markel, the echoes of that gunfire still linger, not just in the quiet streets of his Tallahassee neighborhood, but in the hearts of everyone who followed this story. For the Markel family, justice came slowly. Every hearing, every delay, every appeal tested their faith. But they never gave up. They believed that one day the truth would stand taller than every lie told to hide it. For the Adelsons, the fall was steep. What once appeared to be a close, successful family was exposed piece by piece, not by enemies but by their own choices. Charlie's laughter in the courtroom, Donna's calm expression, and Wendy's silence became symbols of how denial can sometimes speak louder than confession. Through the years, investigators and prosecutors worked quietly, determined not to let this case fade into memory. Their persistence showed that even when justice seems far away, it can still arrive, and when it does, it demands a price. The story of Dan Markel isn't only about a murder. It's about how ambition, resentment, and pride can twist love into control. It's about what happens when people believe they can outsmart the truth. And in the end, it's about how one man's dedication to doing what was right, refusing to be intimidated, refusing to give up his children, cost him his life but secured his legacy. Dan Markel will forever be remembered not as a victim, but as a father and scholar who stood by his principles. His family continues to honor his memory, ensuring his sons grow up knowing who he was and what he stood for. Today, the Markel murder case stands as one of the most haunting examples of how a single act of greed can destroy generations. No matter how carefully a plan is made, no matter how deep it's buried, truth doesn't stay hidden forever. From the day the shots were fired to the moment Donna Adelson heard her sentence, this case has reminded the world that justice may take time, but it never stops moving. And as the final gavel fell, one truth became clear. You can silence a voice, but you can't silence the truth it leaves behind. This is more than just a headline or a courtroom drama. It's a reminder that behind every case, there are lives forever changed, families broken, lessons learned, and a truth that refuses to fade. Dan Markel's story continues to echo through time, a story of justice, determination, and the high cost of silence. And even now, long after the cameras have stopped rolling, people still ask the same question. Was it all worth it? One choice, one plan, one moment, and everything changed forever. This is a true life story. If you've watched till the end, tell us in the comments what you think about the verdict and the justice that followed. Do you believe everyone involved has truly been held accountable? And as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that reveal the truth behind the headlines. Because sometimes, real life is more shocking than fiction.